These planes are too ugly to look at, and too important to lose. Picture this, a jet so swollen and deformed it looks like a whale grew wings and forgot how to land. A hunchbacked monster with a bubble of a body and a head that looks bolted on by mistake. People point, people laugh, and here's the part that should stop you cold. If you grounded just a handful of these freaks, the two biggest plane makers on Earth would seize up inside a week. No new Boeings, no new Airbus jets, the whole assembly line dead. Because there are only about 9 of these humpback giants in the entire world, and every single day they carry wings and fuselages too big for anything else that flies. So why would anyone spend billions building the ugliest airplanes in the sky? And why does almost nobody ever see them? Stay with me. Rewind to the early 2000s. Boeing has a brilliant new airplane on the drawing board, the 787 Dreamliner, and it's built unlike anything before it. Most of the plane is made of carbon fiber, not aluminum. The wings, the fuselage, baked in giant ovens halfway around the world. Here's the problem nobody outside Boeing thinks about. The wings come from Japan. Big fuselage barrels come from Italy, more sections from Charleston and Wichita, and the final plane gets bolted together near Seattle. So picture the map, pieces of one airplane scattered across 3 continents. How do you move a wing the size of a house from Nagoya to Washington State? You can't fold it. You can't cut it in half. By sea, it took up to a month. A month. For a company trying to build planes fast, that's a death sentence. So Boeing needed a solution that didn't exist yet. They were about to build one of the strangest machines ever to leave the ground. Their answer was the Dreamlifter, and the way they made it is almost comical. Boeing took 4 used 747 jumbo jets, planes that once carried passengers across oceans, and gutted them. Then they bolted on a fuselage so bloated it looks cartoonish. The new body balloons out to a cargo hold of 65,000 cubic feet. That's about 1,840 cubic meters. Think of it this way. It can swallow 3 times the cargo of a normal 747 freighter. It can haul 250,000 pounds, roughly 113 tons. And here's the detail almost nobody knows. The whole tail of the airplane swings open sideways. The entire back end, not a door, the tail itself, hinged like a giant trunk, so engineers can slide an entire wing straight in from behind. Only 4 of these things were ever built. 4. And those 4 hold up an entire global airplane program. Isn't it wild that the most important freighters on Earth are leftover passenger jets in a fat suit? Now think about what that actually means for a second. 4 airplanes. That's it. There is no backup fleet sitting in a hangar. If one Dreamlifter breaks, you've lost a quarter of the entire system overnight. So Boeing flies them like clockwork, around the world, again and again, the same loop. Italy, Japan, Charleston, Wichita, Seattle. What used to take a month by ship now takes about 9 hours by air. 9 hours versus a month. Run that number through your head. That's the difference between a 787 rolling off the line on schedule and Boeing bleeding money in a parking lot full of half-finished jets. These ugly whales aren't a luxury. They're the artery. Cut the artery, and the whole body dies. And Boeing isn't even the only company betting everything on a flying whale. Across the Atlantic, Airbus had the exact same nightmare. Their planes get built in pieces too, scattered across France, Germany, Spain, and Britain. Wings in Wales, fuselage sections in Germany, final assembly in Toulouse and Hamburg. So Airbus built its own monster, and honestly, it might be even weirder looking. They call it the Beluga, named after the whale, because that is exactly what it looks like. A smiling white whale with a cockpit tucked down low, like the pilots are peeking out from under the chin. The original Beluga, the A300-600 ST, they built only five. Five planes holding up all of Airbus. And for years, those five whales did the impossible, hauling enormous wings and body sections between countries every single day. But here's the twist. Airbus kept building bigger planes, and eventually, the whale wasn't big enough to carry the very parts Airbus needed it to carry. So what do you do when your giant cargo plane is too small? You build a bigger whale. Enter the Beluga XL. This thing is monstrous. The cargo hold is 8.8 meters across. That's nearly 29 feet wide. Picture a tunnel almost 3 stories tall running down the spine of the airplane. It can haul 51 tons. And here's the number that makes it real. It can carry 2 complete wings of an Airbus A350 at the same time. 2 wings, side by side, inside one airplane. Airbus has 6 of these new whales flying right now. Stop and think about how thin that margin is. The entire future of Airbus, one of only 2 companies on Earth that builds big jets, rests on 6 airplanes that look like a child's bath toy. So if these machines are so critical, why does almost nobody ever see one? That's where it gets strange. Here's the quiet truth almost nobody mentions. These whales fly in the shadows. They don't carry passengers, so they're not on any schedule you can book. They don't fly into the big, bright terminals where you wait for your flight. They sneak into cargo ramps and factory airfields, load up in the dark, and slip away. You could live your whole life next to an airport and never once spot one. And the companies kind of like it that way. Think about it from Boeing's side. Would you want the whole world watching the single most fragile link in your supply chain? Every flight is a gamble. Weather, mechanical trouble, one bad day, and $1 billion production line stalls. So these planes do the most important job in aviation, in near total silence. Until, every once in a while, one of them screws up in the most spectacular way imaginable. And that's exactly what happened on a November afternoon over Kansas. November 20th, 2013. A Dreamlifter is inbound to Wichita, Kansas, loaded with composite parts for the 787. The plan is simple. Land at McConnell Air Force Base, drop the precious cargo. Done. Inside that swollen belly sits a fortune in carbon fiber, parts reportedly worth close to $200 million. The pilots line up, they see a runway, they put the giant down. Smooth landing. And then the crew looks around and feels their stomach drop. This isn't McConnell. They've landed at the wrong airport. A tiny field called Colonel James Jabara, about 8 miles short of where they were supposed to be. A little general aviation strip never meant for a 4-engine giant. Picture that. The most important cargo plane in Boeing's fleet, parked on a runway built for puddle jumpers, with $250 million of airplane guts in its belly. And now, they had a far bigger problem than embarrassment. Because here's what nobody on the ground realized at first. Getting the whale down was the easy part. Getting it back up looked nearly impossible. A loaded 747 needs a long runway to take off. A lot of runway. And little Jabara's strip was dangerously short for a jet that size, especially fully fueled. So engineers ran the math overnight, and it was brutal. Could this giant even leave? The next day, a fresh crew flew in. They stripped the margins to the bone, calculated every foot, and waited for the right conditions. Police shut down the roads around the airport, just in case the worst happened. Then, at 16 minutes past 1 in the afternoon, the engines roared, the brakes let go, and that ugly whale clawed itself into the air with runway to spare. It worked! But for a few hours, the entire 787 program had been sitting on a runway in the middle of nowhere, held hostage by a wrong turn in the sky. So step back and look at what these machines really are. Not beautiful, not famous, not something you'll ever buy a ticket on. Just 9 or so hunchbacked giants, quietly doing a job no normal plane can do. Without them, the 787 stops. The A350 stops. Two of the most advanced airplanes on Earth, grounded, not by some dramatic crash, but because a wing couldn't get from one country to another. Isn't that the strangest thing about modern flight? The planes everyone admires only exist because of the ones nobody wants to look at. We celebrate the swan and forget the whale that carried it. The ugliest planes in the sky hold up the prettiest ones. That's not a flaw. That's the whole secret. The future of flight rides inside a monster.
Boeing built the most advanced jet on Earth. It can't fly you anywhere. Picture this, the biggest twin-engine airliner ever made, with wings so wide they have to fold up just to fit at the gate. Engines the size of a small jet's whole fuselage. A machine that broke a world record before it ever carried a single paying passenger. And yet, 6 years after it was supposed to enter service, the Boeing 777X still isn't carrying anybody, not one ticketed traveler. Here's the number that should stop you cold. Boeing has burned through more than $15 billion on this program. $15 billion. And the meter is still running. So how does the most ambitious airplane Boeing ever designed become the symbol of everything going wrong inside the company? Stay with me. To understand the mess, you have to understand the dream. Go back to 2013. Boeing is on top of the world. The 787 Dreamliner is selling. The original 777 is a legend, one of the most profitable jets in history. So Boeing asks a simple question. What if we took that legend and made it bigger, longer, and far more efficient? That's the 777X, a stretched, modernized super twin built to swallow the market for giant long-haul jets, just as the four-engine monsters were dying off. The plan looked bulletproof. Enter service by 2020. Crush the competition, print money for the next 30 years. So what could possibly go wrong with a sure thing? Almost everything, it turns out. And the first crack showed up before the plane ever left the ground. Let's talk about why this plane is a genuine engineering marvel, because that's what makes the story so strange. Start with the wings. To fly efficiently, the 777X needs an enormous wingspan, 235 feet tip to tip. That's about 72 meters. That's wider than the wingspan of a 747 Jumbo. There's just one problem. No airport gate on Earth is built for a wing that wide. So Boeing did something no big airliner had ever done. The wingtips fold. The last 11 feet of each wing, roughly 3.5 meters, hinge straight up after landing. Think of it like folding the wing mirrors on your car to squeeze into a tight garage, except the mirror is the size of a small plane. It's brilliant, it's clean, and it was a regulatory nightmare waiting to happen. Now, the engines, and these are almost hard to believe. Each one is called the GE9X, and it is the largest jet engine ever bolted to a commercial aircraft. How big? The fan up front measures 134 inches across, more than 11 feet, nearly 3.5 meters. That's wide enough that the body of a 737 could almost slide through the front of it. Let that sink in. The engine is nearly as wide as an entire other airliner's cabin. And it's a record breaker. During testing, a single GE9X cranked out 134,000 pounds of thrust, enough to set a Guinness World Record for the most powerful commercial jet engine ever. So you've got record wings, a record engine, and the most modern systems Boeing knows how to build. On paper, this thing is unstoppable. So why has it spent more time in hangars than in the sky? Here's where the dream meets reality, and it's brutal. September 2019, Boeing rolls a 777X airframe into a test rig in Everett, Washington. This is the big one, the ultimate load test. They bend and stress the airframe far beyond anything a passenger flight would ever see, all the way to 1.5 times the maximum load. It's the test that proves the plane won't break apart in the worst possible moment. The pressure climbs, higher, higher. And then, at 1.48 times the limit, the fuselage explodes. The skin tears wide open just behind the wing. A passenger door blows clean off and slams into the factory floor. Now here's the cruel part. The plane failed at 99% of the target, 1% short. So close, and yet a catastrophic public failure. Boeing tried to keep the photos quiet. They leaked anyway. But a failed test you could survive. What you can't survive is timing. Because while the 777X was struggling, the rest of Boeing was on fire. Think back to what else was happening. 2 737 MAX jets had crashed, killing 346 people. The MAX was grounded worldwide. Investigators tore into how Boeing certified its planes, and what they found shook the entire system. The cozy relationship between Boeing and the FAA, where Boeing largely policed itself, was over. So picture the timing. Right as Boeing rolls up to certify its next big jet, the regulator decides it's done taking the company's word for anything. Every assumption, every shortcut, every trust us gets thrown out. The 777X didn't just inherit a tougher world. It inherited a regulator that no longer trusted its maker. And that changed everything. So what does distrust actually cost? Years. The FAA, burned by the MAX, demanded a far deeper, slower, more documented certification than Boeing ever planned for. Remember those clever folding wingtips? Regulators had to write brand new rules for a moving wing on a passenger jet because nothing like it existed. Every system got re-examined. Here's the part nobody tells you. A lot of the delay wasn't broken metal. It was paperwork, process, and proof. Boeing kept saying the plane was nearly ready. The FAA kept saying, prove it, again. The first flight finally happened in January 2020. A milestone, sure, but entry into service, the date that actually matters, kept sliding. 2020 became 2021, then 2023, then 2025. Each delay quieter and more expensive than the last. And then, just when it looked like the finish line was close, the plane broke again. August 2024. A test jet lands after a 5-hour flight back from Hawaii. During a routine inspection, engineers find something nobody wanted to see. A thrust link, the custom-built part that connects that giant GE9X engine to the wing, had cracked. Then they checked the other test planes. More cracks. Think about what that means. The single component holding one of the most powerful engines ever built to the airframe was failing in flight testing. Boeing grounded the entire test fleet on the spot. Flight stopped cold for roughly 4 months, while engineers redesigned and reinforced the part. 4 more months gone. And the question hanging over everyone got louder. When is this plane actually going to fly passengers? Now imagine you're the customer waiting on the other end of this. You're Emirates, the airline that bet its whole future on this jet, with hundreds of them on order. You were promised these planes years ago. You've rebuilt your fleet plans around them again and again. And every year, Boeing comes back and says, just a little longer. Tim Clark, the man who runs Emirates, stopped being polite about it. He said he was, in his words, a little bit miffed to learn about the latest delay from the news instead of from Boeing directly. He told the planemakers to stop hiding behind excuses, snapping that they couldn't keep blaming the supply chain because, quote, you are the supply chain. And here's the twist. Even furious, even burned, Emirates didn't walk away. At the end of 2025, they ordered 65 more, pushing their total past 270 jets. Why on earth would you double down on a plane that keeps letting you down? Because for what they need, there's simply nothing else like it. So where does that leave the 777X? In late 2025, Boeing took another $4.9 billion charge and pushed the first delivery into 2027. Do the math. A plane meant to fly in 2020, now hoping for 2027. 7 years late, with the bill north of $15 billion and climbing. And the cruelest part? The engineering was never really the villain. The wings work. The record engine works. The fixes work. What broke wasn't the machine. It was trust, timing, and a company that promised the world right as the world stopped believing it. The 777X is a masterpiece, built in the wrong decade for its maker. Boeing didn't lose the plane. It lost the benefit of the doubt.